Hey everybody, I want to talk for a minute about what I've been teaching on the channel. And most of you know that the Lord has led me into these topics. They're nothing that I selected, and I have witnesses that know that I was led into specifically teaching against John Calvin, what I consider to be the doctrines of the devil. I teach against these modern versions of God's Word, how these versions have corrupted God's Word, the truth in God's Word. And I've taught it many times, and I'm not the first, but I wanted to let y'all know, if you get on the internet and you start teaching about Jesus, the truth, you're going to get hate, and you're going to get hate from professing Christians that are chained to man's teachings. You won't see the fruit in them, and their words testify against them. You're only their friend if you believe like they do. I brought you the truth from the scriptures, from God's Word. And as long as He has me share this with you, as long as He's bringing these lessons to me, I'm going to share it. I didn't want to believe that John Calvin's teachings were doctrines of devils. I didn't want to believe it, but I saw it, and from witnesses from others that wanted to believe in God, but their faith was overthrown because Calvinism taught them that God is evil. I'm not the first person that's said this, and these quotes from John Wesley and Charles Wesley, they are, to me, they're verification. They came after I realized the truth about John Calvin's teachings. These quotes came to me, and John Wesley and Charles were Methodist ministers. John was known for his teachings, his preaching, and Charles was known for his teaching, but also writing hymns. They were both godly men. I'm sure I wouldn't agree with everything they taught, and I'm sure they knew the Bible better than I do, but they recognized the teachings of John Calvin as being evil, and they spoke about it. I'm not the first. I never knew that these teachings were evil, but this is verification that I've received recently. I shared one of the quotes with you from John not long ago. But let me tell you what John said, what John Wesley said about the double predestination, what's taught now, where God saves some and sends the rest to hell for His own glory, with no chance of salvation. They are condemned, and that you need to remember that as we go through these quotes, that John Calvin believed that God Himself condemns them to hell for His own glory. That's what double predestination is, saving some and God condemning the rest. But what John Wesley said was, it destroys all His attributes at once, all God's attributes at once. It overturns both His justice, mercy, and truth. Yea, it represents the most holy God as worse than the devil, as both more false, more cruel, and more unjust. That was John Wesley. Charles Wesley spoke of the poison of Calvin. But who can stand before envy, bigotry, and predestination? The strong ones were offended. The poison of Calvin has drunk up their spirit of love. Charles thought the doctrines of Calvinism were poisonous. In this case, he saw the love of professing Christians being swallowed up in the doctrines of men. I've experienced that on this channel. The love of professing Christians being swallowed up in the doctrines of men. I know that firsthand. Charles goes on to teach the preaching sad tidings when there's people in the church and a Calvinist is teaching. He can't teach salvation for everyone because not everyone in the church is going to be of the elect. Not everyone's going to be saved, even though they have the opportunity to be saved. Calvin teaches that God condemns those that he will for his pleasure, for his glory. So people come in the church, there's some of them that have no chance of being saved, even though the preacher teaches salvation. He can't apply it to all. Now, the love, we talked about the evidence of Christ in us and the love that we should have for our brothers. Charles records criticism of his friend and fellow Methodist, George Whitfield. You notice he criticized him, but he had a love for him. He called him his friend, but he also called him, as Whitfield preached Calvinism, Charles called him a reprobating lion. He was trying to correct him in love, pointing out his mistakes because he loved his friend and fellow Methodist, George Whitfield, that was teaching Calvinism. He also questioned his character and the character of the God who sent him to preach a gospel of particular redemption and absolute reprobation. So in the sermon, he'd say, he was talking about a sermon of George Whitfield's, the people fled before the reprobating lion, but again and again, as he observed them depart, the preacher of sad tidings called them back with general offers of salvation. Vain and empty offers, and indeed, because of what he believed. What availed his telling them that for aught he knew, they may all be elect, that they could all be saved? He did not believe them all elect. He could not. Therefore, he only mocked them with an empty word of invitation. And if God sent him to preach the gospel to every creature, God, according to his scheme, sent him to deceive the greatest part of mankind. This evil doctrine of John Calvin, makes God a deceiver, and he makes the preacher, George Whitfield, a deceiver, because he knew he was teaching salvation. But according to John Calvin, salvation wasn't for all. And so this is verification. It's not of the scriptures. I get verification through the scriptures also, but it helped verify the fact that when I realized how evil Calvinism, that structured theology of man, when I realized how evil it was, I didn't want to believe it. But people have known it for centuries. And I just thought I'd share those quotes with you. If you don't believe me, you might believe them. You can study who they were. But I'm going to continue bringing you these messages because God tells me to, and it's because I love you. And if the Lord be willing, I'll see you later.